Hey everyone, my name is Thomas, and this is going to be the very first video uploaded on my channel. And today, I'm going to be going over why LangChain does not suck anymore. Most specifically, this is around their 1.0 release. So on September 2nd, 2025, they published this article, and they basically said, hey, we're flipping the script. LangChain is now going to depend on LangGraph. So all of our create agent loop is going to be done via the LangGraph primitives. So they're going to handle creating the graph, they're going to handle the nodes, they're going to have the durability, etc. They also released this nice, clean looking documentation website. They've tried to consolidate the Python and TypeScript docs, and I will say this has been a much better experience. And for context here, I do use LangGraph in production right now, so I've been a LangGraph user, just not a LangChain. Oh, and up at the top here, they just raised a whopping $125 million Series B round. So kudos to them. But first, I'm going to go ahead and start over here in my notebook. As you can see at the top here, LangChain does not suck anymore. Specifically, what's new in V1. So LangChain, and this is just quoting from them, is a focused, production-ready foundation for building agents. We've streamlined the framework around 3 core improvements. Create React agent, standard content blocks, and then I just put middleware. I think they had put initially refining the LangChain package and not be like a million different things now. It's just a very slim namespace. Let's first talk a little bit about this new create agent. This has been kind of a familiar concept for those that have used LangChain in the past. And particularly if you've used LangGraph, there's this create React agent. And so I just want to go down the history a little bit here. If you were to try to replicate the functionality that the new create agent gives you, you would need to do something like this. Let's just hypothetically say we have a calculator, and obviously this isn't a great example, but we have a tool for multiply, add, divide, etc. Let's say we initialize our chat model, we add these tools to it, we do some sort of nice little lookup convenience map here, and then we have LM with tools. We register our nodes for our graph within LangGraph, so we have LM call node and a tool node. So the LM call is supposed to send the call to the LM and get back some sort of response. And then it's supposed to forward over to the tool node, and that tool node will actually call one of the registered tools and then append a tool message to the messages top-level array. Now, for those that haven't used LangGraph, you may not understand everything that's going on here, and that's okay. But I'm just kind of showcasing you a contrasting example of what you would have to maintain if you didn't want to use the create agent. You would also hook in this conditional edge to say, hey, is the latest message a tool call? Well, if it is, let's go ahead and call the proper tool. And that's where it would actually call this tool node. This graph is really 2 nodes with a conditional edge. So LM call, oh, is there a tool? Let's go ahead and call the tool node, then let's go back. And that's kind of what this does, back and forth until it finally ends. And you would compile it, you would send in your first agent message, and you could pretty print it here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this create React agent. And so if we scroll down, you'll see, yep, sure enough, add 3 plus 4. It had 1 tool call, when of course the args were 3 and 4, and it did use the addition tool. And then we see here the sum of 3 and 4 is 7. So pretty trivial things going here. So what does this create agent do? Well, effectively all of that. So this did exist before within LangGraph, and it was called create React agent. And like said, instead of having to do all of this, you could just simply call the create React agent, feed it the tools, feed it that initial prompt, and it would just go for you. So they ported this concept into LangChain natively. And literally the return type of this create agent is actually a compiled state graph, which is a primitive within LangGraph. So if we look here in this create agent demo, I have created an agent using my OpenAPI key and GPT-5 Nano. I have the get weather tool, and then I invoke, hey, what's the weather like in San Francisco? And as you can imagine, because it's pretty easy here, it's sunny in blank, it's going to say it's sunny in San Francisco. Sure enough, we see the first message, the human, we see the tool calls that were initiated, we see the response to that tool or that AI message as the tool message, and then, hey, would you, of course, it's being a little extra here and asking, hey, would you like to know the blah, 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 which is wild because we don't even have tools for that. And then I also want to showcase, you can also give it a system prompt. So if you wanted to say, hey, speak in some sort of pirate slang, this is a silly example, of course, but let's scroll down. the weather be sunny and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, this is normally my go-to just to make sure the gut check that the system prompt is even working or have it speak in Spanish or something. So yeah, this create agent is really powerful. You don't have to think about the LangGraphisms of having to have this should continue and adding the nodes. Of course, if you need to do that, you can. But in general, this create agent is very powerful, gives you the tools, the models, the system prompt. And like said, if you've used LangGraph before, this context idea, you can actually use the context within the tool. And I'm skipping over a lot of stuff here because I'm really just trying to highlight V1. That alone sold me on the update was that create agent being pulled into LangChain and then also LangChain using LangGraph as the foundation. Because I'm already using LangGraph, so that just is a +1 for me. So the secondary thing I want to touch on here is standard content blocks. Now, some of this did exist already, but for those of you who have tried to juggle many different providers, for example, if you're juggling between Anthropic and OpenAI, they actually have 2 separate content blocks for certain things. For example, if you want to append a file to a human message, that's completely different, OpenAI versus Anthropic. So what they've done here is they have now standardized content blocks. So you don't have to really think about that. So if you look at my commented code out here, I have content blocks as an array. According to their docs, I haven't tried it myself, you should be able to use this same format and just switch between, I think, 5 to 6 different supported partner providers. One of being OpenAI, one being Anthropic, one being AWS, meaning Amazon Bedrock. So that's pretty nice. Because if you've ever had to juggle them, you know the pain of having to deal with this. And I just wanted to showcase here, this initialized chat model is also a part of the update. You don't have to instantiate chat OpenAI or chat Bedrock. If you just provide this provider up front, or it can actually technically just infer it by this init chat model and we'll instantiate it. It's pretty nice, pretty convenient, but if you do need more control, you may have to still instantiate chat OpenAI in this case, but I didn't need it for this example. And then I'm showcasing where you can pass in a bunch of messages to this model.invoke. So the third thing I wanted to comment on was a super, super powerful feature. So I'm not going to lie, when I first read the V1 update and when I first watched the video of them sitting at like a round table talking about it, talked extensively about middleware and the excitement around it. And I, at the start, didn't really get it. Like, I got why it was nifty, why it was nice. But then I was like, oh, I can just use LangGraph and then have deterministic nodes and then feed them to the LLM to do something, right? Well, no, you don't necessarily have to do this anymore. We have the request and the result. And then between you have before agent, before model, you can then wrap tool calls and or wrap model calls. Then you have after model and after agent. You could use these different hooks to do different things. So for example, before agent, let's say you want to fetch some sort of client specific instruction. Well, you could inject it into the system prompt. And you don't want to run it every time before the model. You just want to run it once at the beginning of the agent invocation. That's awesome. Maybe you want to log before tools are called, or you have some sort of flow where if they hit some sort of tool or they've exhausted many tool options, you might want to jump to the ending. You can define this in middleware. I went through their library and just plucked some of the top middlewares that I thought would be extremely useful for those that are building agentic-like flows. And I went ahead and just put them here with a little snippet. Summarization middleware, that's pretty straightforward. You can actually set, hey, I want a certain amount of tokens before it even starts summarizing. Hey, I want to make sure I keep maybe the latest 20 messages, and then I can even feed in a summary prompt. So this summarization middleware is pretty useful for summarizing those long-winded conversations that keep happening. Another one that's super useful. So if anyone's ever used Claude Code or used some sort of interface, maybe Cursor, where you need to approve before a tool is used, well, they now have that human-in-the-loop middleware, and this just hooks natively in. And see this interrupt on? This is a LangGraph concept where they'll actually surface a human-in-the-loop request, and you'll need to fulfill this request either by approval, denies, some sort of edit action where maybe you want to edit and say, hey, I don't want you to run it like this, but whatever. So we have high-stakes operations requiring human approval, so if you need to do database rights or financial transactions even, you want to have some sort of compliance oversight, or if you just have some long-running conversation where human feedback is used to guide the agent. So this is very useful. I'm going to use the heck out of this as I get into my flows. Preventing runaway agents from making too many API calls. I've had to do this before. They did have this concept, and it was like some sort of limit you could set on the agent, but now you actually have a model call limit itself. And you additionally have a tool call limit. So you can get pretty granular here on, hey, I want the certain models to have limits. Hey, I want certain tool call limits for a particular tool. So not just global, but for a particular one. You can say, hey, I want there to be a certain amount of thread limit. I only want it to run 3 times. There's a lot of customization here, a lot of usefulness that you can get out of this. They gave some examples of enforcing rate limits on specific tools, protecting against runaway agent loops, etc. Another one that's interesting is a model fallback middleware. So for those that have ever had issues with rate limits and or TPM, tokens per minute, you can actually do some sort of fallback. And this is what I've personally had to do over time just to build resiliency against model outages. They also list cost optimization by falling back to a cheaper model, or even providing redundancy across OpenAI and Anthropic. So once again, that model provider problem. There's also this idea of PII middleware. So they give the example of healthcare and financial applications with compliant requirements, or maybe customer service agents that need to sanitize logs. I don't necessarily need this for my applications as much, but I can see where this would be extremely valuable, especially in those compliance-heavy industries. You can say, hey, I want to redact the email. Hey, I want to mask the credit card, and I want to completely block API keys. Another one that's super interesting to me is this to-do list middleware. For those that have used agentic-like experience like Claude Code or Cursor, you'll see how it makes the plan and how it can adjust the plan over time. Well, that's exactly what this to-do list middleware does. And if you know anything about LangChain and their deep agents, I believe this is one of the middlewares that is referenced. And they actually add a system prompt and a tool to your agent flow to make it be able to write to this to-do list and modify it over time. Yeah, long-running operations where progress visibility is important as well. It actually adds to the state of to-dos array, which is pretty nice. So the next one I want to talk about is this LM Tools Selector middleware. This is really, really cool to me. So agents with many tools, 10 plus, where most aren't relevant per query. Now, you could argue maybe you should make sub-agents within a flow, and maybe those sub-agents are more catered with their tools, but sometimes that gets too complex. Maybe you just want something simpler. So you can have an agent, let's just say, with 15 tools, and you want to have an LLM proactively select the tools and scope down your toolkit to only say, hey, LLM, you have access to these 3 tools. It can reduce token usage by filtering the irrelevant tools to your query, and it can improve that model focus and accuracy. And you could even say like, hey, always include search. So for example, this to-do list middleware, you could say always include the like write to-dos, because that's not something you'd want to strip away. In addition, maybe on the max tools, maybe you only ever want 3 tools at a time. That's pretty nice. And then you can have some sort of cheap model to try to infer the tool set that's there. Next, I want to talk about the tool retry middleware. This one's pretty straightforward, but yeah, if you have some sort of tool, like if you can name specific ones like the search that you want to retry, or if you remove this, it gives this by default to all the tools. Last thing I want to talk about is this context editing middleware. Their highlighted use case is clearing old tool uses or maybe removing failed tool attempts. This makes sense to me if you have a long-winded conversation with many consecutive tool uses and tool results. Maybe those aren't as relevant anymore. Maybe your summarization isn't helping as much, or you want to clear it up just a little bit more before that point. You can assign some sort of trigger to remove it. There's also custom context management strategies if you want to dive into those. So for the last thing I wanted to showcase from this update was that you could also do your own custom middleware. I just did a very simplistic logging middleware here that says before model and after model. Before the model runs, I'm going to print this, and then after the model runs, I'm going to print this. Very naive implementation here, but I do want to call out there is actually asynchronous versions of these if you do have asynchronous functions. Just know that this middleware in general is super powerful and can probably bridge the gap between determinism and agentic workflows without having to delve into LangGraph. So that's all I have for this video, guys. Hopefully this got you fired up a little bit. Hopefully you understand where LangChain is headed. It's a mission that it's trying to accomplish now. I'm excited for the future in LangChain, and I can't wait to honestly explore it even further. We've already switched over in some of my production instances to LangChain V1 and LangGraph V1, and it's gone without a hiccup. It's been great. So let me know what you guys think. See ya.